Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. It's so great to see people still eager and ready to learn on Friday of Open Data Week. We have some special guests from MODA with us today who have been instrumental in not only Open Data Week, but in these trainings. So a huge shout out to MODA and all their help throughout this whole week, and Liam, who's here today as a teaching assistant if needed and when needed. And with that, we also have a special guest from MODA named Martha Norick. Martha, I know you just arrived, but would you like to say a few words before we even start? And then I'll pass it off to our Open Data Ambassador.
Yeah, I would love to. I'm Martha Norick. I am the city's acting Chief Analytics Officer and the Director of the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics. And our office helps the city use data to deliver services more equitably and efficiently to all New Yorkers. And that one of the big ways that we do that is leverage this incredible resource, New York City's Open Data platform, which has over 3,000 open data sets and is used by thousands of people across the city, across the world. I think for me, the really unbelievably cool thing about open data is that, especially as the city has been going through this unbelievably hard, it is just incredibly empowering to be able to ask a question about things that are going on in your neighborhood, in your school, on your block, and then go to a data source and answer that question for yourself. And that's something that I do frequently. They're ripping up the street next to me, and I just went to look for the permit about it. I'm so excited that you all have made some time this morning to join us and learn about this incredible resource. And I'm so excited to join you in this learning session today.
Thank you, Martha. That was great to hear. Love the emphasis on how the open data from the city is about people and communities, and that people and communities can and should use it to empower themselves. And it's probably my favorite thing about open data. That's why I'm so passionate about it. I guess I'll get started, as was suggested. This is Open Data 101. First, a quick intro to who we are, which we've just started. A little bit about how New York City government is structured and what organs of it generate data and which ones of those are available to the public, especially 311. It's such a rich source of data. Basically, every interaction between the populace and their government gets captured there. Some of the tools that have been built using open data include Boardstat, which was a BetaNYC project to help support community boards. And then we'll take a look at the open data platform itself. It's where New York City Open Data is hosted, along with rich information about what's in the data and how to use it, as well as tools for extracting interesting subsets of it. And then we'll just take a quick tour of other tools people have built using the open data in particular. So I guess I'll introduce myself a little more in detail. One of the open data ambassadors from the program last year. My day job is at Google. I live in Manhattan. And I guess I got passionate about open data, like I said, primarily in seeing the human side aspect of it, about learning about data in a data science program a couple of years ago. And yeah, it's quite an honor to get to be a part of these programs and to present to all of you. Would any of the others like to introduce themselves? Liam or Kiana? You don't have to if you don't want to.
Sure, I can just say hello. Hi, everyone. My name's La, and I'm a City Service Corps member at the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, working primarily on the open data program. Yeah, and I'm really excited that you all have stuck with us and are here with us on the Friday of Open Data Week at this training, because I think you're going to leave with some really actionable and useful advice and skill sets under your belt. So thanks for being here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kiana. I am a Civic Fellow at the BetaNYC, and this would be my third training I'm actually speaking at, so I really hope you guys really enjoyed what we're going to show you.
It also looks like we have another pretty special guest, which is Helen Rosenthal from City Council.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I have to say that the open data is brilliant, and every time I want to do research on something, I open up the portal, stare at it, and close it down. So I'm excited. One of my staff is on this as well, and I think others of my staff have signed up for other sessions. We're really excited to be here to learn how to use the portal, so we don't just look at it, scream, and shut it down. So thank you for doing this work.
Thank you so much.
And I'll turn it over to Kiana to talk a bit about
So hello everyone, I'm back. So BetaNYC is a civic organization dedicated to improve the lives of New Yorkers. So as you can see from the site, that we actually have YouTube training videos. We have a monthly newsletter, and we also have community data portals where data science come together and reevaluate the information. We're also on Facebook, and we do have various reports. And in 2008, we started this meetup, and now we have over 5,000 members. Next. So BetaNYC actually started as a meetup but of civic technologists, hackers, advocates, and leaders. In 2012, we helped usher in the Open Data law, which you will hear a little bit more about later in the slides. In 2013, we started the People's Roadmap, which is a co-authoring process. And we also wrote the People's Roadmap to Digital New York City. This document has helped produce several proposed pieces of legislation and additional 7 laws. Again, in 2013, the Code for America launched a program that actually will help drive us into the program I'm actually in now. 2014 to 2015, Hack Nights and community building began so we can further strengthen our community. And in 2015 specifically, we invited the MBPO to a Civic Innovation Fellowship. And during this time, the School of Data also happened. This is also in 2015. And in 2016, various tools we created actually played a part in it. And as you can see on the map, the Civic Partnership and Collaboration, that's actually where we actually come in and my fellowship. So in these 3 slides, I specifically want to talk about the talent to career pipeline. So this pipeline is exposed CUNY students to employment as public servants, and they equipped us with digital era analytical skills and gives us an inside view of the government. And from my personal experience, we have learned various tools using Boardstat and using the Open Data portal to take a look inside what the government has to offer and what we can actually configure from that data and questions that we want to be answered from that data. There is research in tools. This is really centered around, I believe, the different tools that we use, like Boardstat and Open Data, but also Radar. Our human-centered research provides in-depth assessments of local needs. We build digital tools and promotes agile processes that make it easier for the government workers to do their jobs. And lastly, we have public engagement. Our trainings, public events, and programs provide critical space for demystifying civic infrastructure and detailed expertise, and directly supporting emerging needs in digital civic society. So basically, we look around and see what people are talking about, what seems to be like a problem in everyday life, and we see in our data and our research and tools how we can somehow configure and able to help it better, make it more accessible for not only us and the government's workers, but also for the public as well. Hence this training. Next slide. This is a nice quote. The fight is never about grapes or lettuce, it's always about people. What this basically means is that the people, we're also the people, but we also want the general public to come together with us, connect, and really empower ourselves and themselves. This is the reason why we've been doing so many of these workshops. We really just want to make this tools that we're using very accessible so more people can learn exactly what's going on in their government, especially local government. Next slide. And that's all about BetaNYC. So I'm going to pass it back to Naj and Liam, which is about NYC Government.
Thank you, Ken. I really appreciate that. It's good to hear the actual personal connection, which is why I thought it'd be good to hear from you there. So a big aspect of what data is produced and who produces it is deeply tied into the history of and structure of our government. It is really big. That's one of the things that's easy to forget about New York City. We all know it's big, but like just our schools, for example, there's over 1 million students, well, like around 1.1 million students in New York City schools. That's bigger than like everything, but if it were a city, it'd be the 10th largest city in the US. And that's just our kids. And unfortunately, the scale of social ills and things like poverty is also on a similar scale. Around 1.3 million New Yorkers are in poverty. And data isn't the solution to that, but it's useful for evaluating approaches and figuring out what questions to ask, obviously in conjunction with listening to affected communities. But yeah, and beyond the people, there's also the infrastructure. This is a city, we've seen the difficulties with subways and the how much we rely on them, or other transit like Penn or Grand Central, and just tens of thousands of miles of sidewalks and pavement. And I know one of my 311 encounters with city government was requesting curb cuts at my nearest intersection. There was a metal curb and it was solid, and there was nowhere for wheelchairs or scooters or luggage or things like that to easily come from the street. And that is just, it's fascinating that how much work it takes, how much human power, like the scale of all these things is pretty daunting. So as the slide mentions, our budgets are comparable to small countries. The key, a key item to note here is that it's a strong mayor form of government. The council advances legislation, and the mayor operates in many ways independently of the council. So it's more of a oversight and collaboration style. So we have a number of elected public officials, public advocate, controller, the various borough presidents, and this year I think we have a DA election coming up, at least in Manhattan. I'm not sure about the other boroughs. The council itself is also larger than in a lot of cities, smaller than you might expect for something as big as New York. 50 plus members and 35 committees, and the geography of the city is divided into 59 community board areas, which we will see again in Boardstat. So this is probably my least favorite slide of this bunch, but it's good for just seeing what the various branches of government are. The colors help, I think. They're useful. It indicates who the various elected officials are in and what falls under their remit. So here we see that the mayor's chief of staff has a number of offices, the deputy mayor for health and human services, and various like food, health, hospitals, things like that, social services. And finally, under the first deputy mayor, there's a lot of the things we think of as service providing aspects of government, stuff like the fire department, like buildings, information technology, or records and information services. And a lot of our open data comes from these agencies in yellow. I believe there is some data from, or in the portal from other of these groups, but I think most of what you'll find is from this yellow group. So why do we even have an open data portal? I don't know how early to the bandwagon New York City was in terms of starting to provide access to open data, but my impression is it was relatively early. The legislation was introduced in 2010 and passed in 2012 and amended every couple of years after that to improve the quality and coverage of the data. It was originally as Local Law 11 in 2012 by Mayor Bloomberg, and it amended the administrative code to mandate that all public data be made available on a single web portal by the end of 2018. The various amendments to it, and one of them is my favorite, is included requirements for data dictionaries and retention and like a documentation of how fresh the data was and stuff like that. The data dictionaries describe what the various fields in a data set are and what they mean, what kinds of codes are used for the rows and what the rows correspond to. Just like the actual meat of what it means to be a data set. It's often easy to misunderstand or hard to use a data set without a dictionary. And this Open Data Week is a celebration of the Open Data Law's passage. As you can see, there's a lot of data sets on the Open Data portal, and these are coordinated by Open Data coordinators. That's redundant, but it's important because it is actually a lot of work to keep open data of high quality, and it's important that there are people whose job it is to do that, especially like with hundreds published every year, and the scale of the data itself requires, again, like resources and people to keep it fresh, keep it good. So I jumped the gun with mentioning a School of Data. Like I said, I don't know how early New York was to adopt open data policies, but ours are really good. They've been a model for a lot of other cities, and School of Data celebrates the fact that we have public access to the facts about our process of government and government interactions with citizens, our people, let's say a lot more broadly, residents. And it's organized by BetaNYC, who you heard about from Kiana earlier. And in partnership with the Open Data team, the conference starts at the beginning of the week. And it's been my favorite civic tech, data-oriented conference for several years now. That's how I got interested in being an open data ambassador, just because of the breadth of seeing what people are doing or want to do or are trying to do in open data and civic technology. So you can see more at School of No Spaces or Dashes .nyc. I talked a bit about why I like open data, but this puts it very succinctly. It is a vehicle for transparency and accountability and improvement. It's a means of communication between governments and the served communities. And it's a means of guiding and validating policy choices. So that's government. But the talk is about open data. And so we'll start with one of my favorite data sets, the NYC 311 data set. And either calling 311 or going to the 311 website or using the 311 app, it is tens of millions of contacts, interactions every year, 200 million calls of service altogether as of a few years ago, probably much more by now. And it's available all day, every day, 175 languages. And, oh, I see. It is also accessible by Skype, Twitter, Facebook. So it's also on social media in addition to apps, website, and phone. So it's there for a lot of needs for 172 agencies and 3,600 services. One of the tools that integrates with 311 data is Boardstat. It was developed by BetaNYC and is a tool for summarizing 311 data by geography, lets you slice and dice what's going on, discover issues and trends within a community board area. And it's aimed for people at community as well as people who live in these areas to see what's going on. I've used it myself to investigate things like unusual noise, to see if people are complaining about things that I'm noticing and stuff like that. It is updated every night, and you can get from BetaNYC's website at boardstat.beta.nyc. And you'll see why you want to in the next few slides. So I just said all that. It was built with the Manhattan Borough President Brewer's office. That's one thing I notice about BetaNYC. They're just almost aggressively collaborative. It's such a gem to have in our community. So it is a lot of text. It's just about where Boardstat came from and what kind of data it's for. So you'll see that in action. So it's structured as a number of activities or processes. On the first page, you see ways to filter by community board, kinds of complaints, descriptions, more detailed descriptions, what agencies the complaint, also that's another funny word. I think they prefer request for service, and whether they're resolved or pending or what's going on with that. Once you set some filters, in this case, this is Community Board 12, it takes you to a view that just gives you a quick summary of what's going on. So here in Community Board 12, we see that there are a lot of street noise complaints, followed by a lot of residential noise complaints, followed by people who have problems with heat and hot water. It shows you that in both the visual and in tabular form. The tabular form also includes other kinds of more detailed descriptors. So we can see here that most of those street sidewalk noise complaints were from loud music or parties, or the residential complaints were also for loud music and parties. Apparently people in Community Board 12 were having a lot of parties in 2020, which is worrying. And one of the other things is, because many 311 requests include a geographic descriptor, an address, intersection, or things like that, it also shows you where most of the requests for service are coming from or what they pertain to. And you can dig into that. So this is, as you can see, page 3, which is being able to look up events at a particular address. Here we see that at that top address, 525 West 169th, this is similar to what we saw more broadly. There's a lot of noise complaints. But there's also illegal parking, rodents, just the things people living in New York have to deal with or complain about or get fixed, better yet. And that's why they're talking to 311. We can see that these, how would I interpret that? It seems like they really took off since 2018. That might mean something. That's the sort of thing that if you could choose to investigate, see what happened between, let's say, 2017 and 2019 or something like that, what changed. And so the fourth screen lets you explore on a map. So here we can see that the map shows you, I think, pie charts of what the breakdown of the various kinds of complaints or requests for service are at each address they've occurred, and the size of them indicates the number, or magnitude. And the similar kinds of filters before, you can choose what community board you're interested in, the date range, who handles it, whether it's done or not. But it's especially like within this community board, we can see this large circle is interesting, and we can dig in and see that it is heat and hot water complaints from a particular address. Other things you can look at, and this can also be very useful, are specific complaint types. So here we can see that the missed trash collections, it looks like they also have clustered in a couple of areas, but this is over an entire year, right? So it would take a little more analysis, but this gives you a sense of where to start looking. You can see if there's a trend in your region, in your subsection. Is it happening more often at your home or at things like that? From an individual perspective, from a community board member, or then it'd be possibly the broader trends might be more interesting, seeing if subgeographies are more affected than others or things like that, which maybe seems to be the case here. The cool thing here is you can actually select multiple complaint types. When the filter was all, you saw that the pie charts were very broadly colored, had many slices. Here, just 2 are selected, and you can see what the ratios are at any given location. It can be a little difficult to read, especially when a lot of them overlap, but that's also an informative signal. So we see one of the things we might be interested in here is a mix of 2 different kinds of requests for service related to homelessness. So this could give us information about where there are a lot of requests for service related to multiple homelessness conditions. And that's that can be interesting to see if there are clusters, if there are particular areas that need more focus or things like that. You can also view by agency. I mentioned that the requests get routed to 172 different agencies. You can see who handles them and which agencies get the most requests for service. That's, as you can see in this example, NYPD got the most. And this is not entirely surprising. You're not going to be making as many Department of Health and Mental Hygiene or Transportation Service requests as things involving people in a city with so many. Some things to note here are that you can see the average lifespan of a ticket, the duration from opening to closing. And as you filter by agency, you can see how different departments are doing. This is for all of them right now, because the agency type is all, and for all the complaint types. So you can see if certain complaint types are not being handled as well. That's one of the more interesting things here, especially the fact that you can drill down by all of these filters. You can choose the date range, the agency, as well as all the other things, status of the ticket. Now, this one is new. I haven't, since much of the Open Data Ambassador work was in 2019, in the lead up to the census, that was all before COVID. So there's now been a lot of complaint types that may be related to COVID. So here we see non-emergency police matters, social distancing, or vehicle noise. And so for complaint types that could be related to COVID, we see an unusual distribution in 2020. So what happened here? And what is the gray bar? What is the missing complaint type? So social distancing is a new complaint type for non-emergency police matter. So that's in one of these multiple filters. Emily, what is the gray bar?
I know because I'm going to try to get someone in the audience to take a guess. So yeah, people who live in Upper Manhattan or in other parts of the city, this was not just an Upper Manhattan issue. Does anyone, summer 2020 was a difficult summer in a lot of ways, but there was one spike in 311 service requests around a particular issue that we see here in Manhattan CB12. Anyone have a guess? Okay, we've got someone saying no masks. That is a good guess. That may have, so that's not this particular issue, but it could be, and possibly, yeah. So anyone else have any other guesses? We were already thankfully starting to peak down from the hospital, the spike in hospitalizations and deaths in April, thankfully, but there was a lot of other stuff going on in the summer. And this is actually a lighthearted one, just to bring in a little bit of smiles too. This has already been a very lighthearted and a very joyful training. But yeah, this is a lighthearted 311 issue mostly, but really caused some serious commotion up in various parts of the city. June 2020. There we go. Fireworks. Yep.
Okay. Yes, that explains June and July then. I remember that now. I heard them through, in my neighborhood too. Yeah, that was strange. And I guess that explains the slide. Right on. So I guess that covers the slides on Boardstat. Do any of you want to see it? Is there anything you're curious about with it? You can ask in the chat or unmute if you want. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go onto the Open Data platform. Collects mostly 311 data. There's a lot of other data, thousands of other data sets. And we're going to go through an example of finding the data and extracting interesting data and then doing stuff with it in Google Sheets. I like how BetaNYC's Noel Hidalgo never remembers this URL, opendata.cityofnewyork.us, so he always searches for it. I think you can get there from nyc.gov/data, which is probably what I do. I think that's how I get there, but you might have an extra click in that case. So it is not necessarily obvious that this white box is a search box. I don't always notice that because of the color scheme, but it is. And it even proposes a few things that you might be interested in looking at. It has a feature for creating accounts, and that's useful if you want to save any of your searches. You don't have to use it in any given session. You can log in after you've done your search to save your queries, things like that. It's nice from that perspective. I don't know if there's a privacy policy associated with it, but there probably is if you dig around. And it asks for the usual. And again, one of the big things that it lets you do is save your data sets, save your filters and queries and extractions of interesting bits of data and things like that. So now we'll look for something. So as recommended, we're going to look at 311 data. So how do you do that? You search for 311. What happens? Boom, you get a lot of results. It's not always the case, but in this case, the first hit is the best one. This is probably what you're looking for if you are looking for 311 data. And see here it's called 311 service requests rather than complaints this time. And so you would click on probably the title as opposed to one of the tags. The tags would take you to searches for those other things. And you get some information about it. It gives you the title and description again, as well as when it was last updated, how often it's updated, when it was introduced, how many people have looked at it. That's a fun one. It tells you a bit about the popularity of a data set, views as well as downloads. And there should be a link to the data dictionary here. And it can be easy to miss these because they're, at the top away from the text of the page, but there's a menu or button bar at the top, which lets you either do some visualizations, look at the data in tabular format, export what you're looking at, or get some URLs for using in programs. Like API endpoints, I think you can use in Tableau if any of you do that, for example. We're going to go to view data. And when we do that, we see a table. There's a lot of rows, 20 plus million at the time of this slide's creation, and a lot of columns. These are described in the data dictionary, and you can see there's a little bit of redundancy. So this is useful for the data processing. There's a short name for the agency, so code, and there's its full name as well. Some other things that are interesting here are the unique key. We'll see why that's interesting later. Each record has a unique key in this, and that can, we'll see. So I guess it does call it a complaint type. Okay, so we can look at those and we see that there are a bunch of them, 446 complaint types. And these are common across all the records. This is kind of the domain of things people can complain about. This table shows a few of the more commonly used for CB12, as with the prior examples, which I guess we'll see how about here. This one way you can generate that, remember that blue filter button up top? It has a few little sections, and one of them lets you add filters. So here you can add a filter for community board, which is one of the columns that's not shown here, but is one of the columns. And you can choose a kind of comparison. Here, this is a textual equality, and you can say that it is exactly 12 Manhattan, which is how it describes Manhattan in CB12. And so once you filter, you can see that there's a much smaller number of service requests. Rather than the millions, we are down to hundreds of thousands. You can add more filters, and here we can filter date is after. Created date is actually one of the visible columns. It gives a date and a time. And you can also filter by agency, as we do here, sanitation. So these are the 311 calls after December 20, since December 2020, inclusive, in CB12. So these, more illegal fireworks. So a quick view of how to get data, or how to choose data in the portal. Ooh, that's a good question. Can I find all the organizations in a community board, churches, schools, etc.? Let's try it. There should be an empty page. Okay, good. Okay, and that was, let's see if my data is right. Boom, yes, takes you right there, no clicks, awesome. So we want to look for organizations. Yeah, 311 is not geocoded, or sort of, it has the addresses or something for this, but you'd have to actually get the geography of those through some other mechanisms around the surface. I know there's a bunch, but not all of them are free, and all of them let you actually download the location data, which is tricky. The terms of service for geocoding services can be tricky, can be restricted.
Nana Rajan, about this council district issue that's come up. So I might have misused the phrase geocoded to council district. How would you state that council district is not? How would you state in a little bit more technical terms that council district is not a column in the 311 data? Because community district is, but not council district. Is there a better way to phrase that?
No, I think that's accurate. It is a geographic descriptor, so saying it doesn't include council district as geographic metadata is maybe the more technical way to do it, but I think that's clear. I usually think of geocoding as associating with a very specific place or region, like some sort of geographic entity. So that, and I guess a council district is a geographic entity, so that's accurate. But yeah, like actually finding organizations in the community. Let's see, organizations. What kind of city government agency would deal with organizations? I thought it might be buildings, but that's probably not. That's a great question. Any ideas, Emily? Who would have that information? I bet they don't have it by community board, though. So that would be the sort of thing you might.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. I could highlight one interesting potential data set here, which is that there's a collection of data about the locations of contracted social services in the city. So a lot of agencies contract with local community-based organizations for after-school programs, senior centers, things like that. And there's a data set in Open Data that are the locations of where those contracted services are being delivered. And I think if you look over on the data collection side of you scroll down a little bit, it is verified locations for NYC city-funded social service contracts.
Nice.
And there's a 2020 version and a 2018 version. So you want the more recent one, obviously. The data model changed between the 2 years, so that's why there's two different collections as opposed to just one.
Right on. So we can see data is provided by a whole bunch of agencies. So that's cool. So this is an interesting note. If it says it's historical data, that means that it's not generally updated. It refers to some specific time period, and you will see other data sets for other time periods. So
this collection refers to a specific fiscal year.
Yeah. And you can see that there's a data dictionary as well as a document describing that. We can take a quick look at the data to see what the columns are. Okay, scroll 6,000 rows. Visualizing if this supports a map visualization. just now. This might not be quite what I'm looking for. It just has the date of verification and IDs.
Are you on the data set that's the sites data set? This is actually a relational data set, which is an interesting, this is maybe like Open Data 201 or 301. This is a couple of different data sets that relate to each other using a set of keys. Right. So I think if you're on the address verification one, and if you switch to the one that is that, we'll have the geographic information about each particular address. I can put the data set in the chat. There we go. This still may not work. We're doing it live.
Yeah, exactly. Demos have a long history of cool
geocoded information, including the council district on this data set.
It's like with census data, you can often get either find geographic things. This year, they're going to be releasing down to the census block level, which here is pretty close to a city block. They go up to block groups, then tracts. Typically after that, they go up to counties and states, but there's some other divisions too. But yeah, census data that's a lot of fun too. Yeah, so here we can see that the sites have some ID, provider ID, what program, contract number, agency contracting, and latitude, longitude, and council and community board numbers. These community board numbers are interesting because they are just plain numbers. It might be that like we could look at the data dictionary to see how to map those to our usual community board numbers if necessary. Like it could be that it's the first digit might be the borough or something like that. Yeah. And NTA is another interesting geography. It corresponds to our colloquial neighborhoods. So Hell's Kitchen would have an NTA maybe or something like that. Oh, and look at that, census geographies. Here's a tract number. Yeah, address, details. Oh yeah, this is a great data set. So yeah, it might not tell you what a church is, but you could find churches that offer community services and are contracted with the city here. So legal aid society. So yeah, that's a cool data set. Thank you. I wonder if one of the locations I volunteer at is on there. Encore services. Senior center. All right. Thank you. That was fun to explore. Ooh, what's the capital planning? One sec.
This is a data that's provided by the Department of City Planning, where they take both locations that are physical locations that are owned and operated by the city. So that's like schools, all of the sanitation garages, and then they also include this data set as well of physical locations where there's a city service being offered that's through a community-based organization, but that's in contract with the city.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I see that. And it's got a nice exploration interface.
And all of this data is also all available to download as a data set as well. So you can use the website to interact with the data, but you can also get the raw data itself. They are in compliance with
somewhere else.
Yeah, through that Open Data link there. It might also be on, if you search Facilities Explorer on the Open Data platform itself. But yeah, the full database is available for download there too, which is a really valuable data set. Churches are actually really hard. That's a difficult data set. And I know it's one that would be very useful, but it actually is a point of geography that changes fairly frequently.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it seems like you might be able to wave your hands at that by looking for untaxed lots. I don't know if the contents of the data set or something like that. But
yeah, maybe the Pluto data set, which is a really awesome data set. Pluto stands for Primary Land Use Tax Output, not Pluto the friendly cartoon dog, but they have what is this particular parcel used for, zoned for, and I think zoning might also be a way to identify churches or community-based organ facilities.
Cool, thank you. That's really interesting. How much I have a technical. So I guess we were doing this. Yeah, that's an interesting one. How to find churches by community board or council district. Do you know if the Pluto includes any of those geographic identifiers, council district or community board?
I believe it does. It has a very robust data dictionary, Pluto, so you can verify, but it does have, I believe it has the full set of geocoding information that's returned from New York City's GeoClient, which is a free open source geocoding tool that Do It and the Department of City Planning make.
Oh, that's a good question from Helen Rosenthal. Do you know if the contracts themselves are public? Are they the records?
Yes. So our data set includes the includes the contract number, which you can use to tie, and also includes the name of the provider, and I believe the contract amount for that fiscal year for that contract. But I would like to give a big shout out to the New York City Comptroller's Office, who publishes this really amazing open data set called Checkbook, which is a full data set that also has a good API where you can get contract data or data about particular contracts. And the contract ID that we provide in our data set ties back to the comptroller's database as well. So there's more information if you can link those two data sets together, which I would be happy to talk more about. The contracting data in the city is really fascinating.
Yeah, and that's to understand what is going on in a city. That's one of the most, that's the pulse right there. That's the actual outflow of cash for services. Yeah, and that website I just searched for is called checkbooknyc.com. I'll paste that in here, actually.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I actually worked, before I joined MODA, I worked on the team that works on collecting this location data. And one of the reasons why we wanted to do it is that I think you're totally right. One of the most interesting questions you can ask is how much investment is there going into particular communities, and are there disparities in the types of facilities or the types of funding that different neighborhoods get? So this data set is an effort to help try and answer that question for services that are funded through.
That's exciting, and definitely have to play with that. Have to take a look. That's really good. Yeah, neat. All right, I guess I'll move on at this point. So, yeah, I worked on a project to scrape eviction filings from the Harris County, Texas, Houston Justice Courts to Justice of the Peace Courts, actually, and then geocoding the addresses in those. And it was so much fun. It was for the Salvation Army in Houston. They had a grant program to help keep people, pay off arrears for rent and help keep them housed, that was going unused every year. And we found some temporal and spatial patterns. One of the sad things was that the census tracts that had the highest eviction counts were identical for 10 years. The top 10 was the same for 10 years. So it gave them some good info on when and where to try to raise awareness of the grant program. So that was, yeah. Bye, Kevin. Thanks for your help. And Martha, you've been awesome. I really appreciate your comments. This is great. So eviction data, there's also at Princeton, there's a project called Eviction Lab where they are trying to quantify nationwide patterns of evictions. Anyway, it's a really important point of intervention to understand for homelessness prevention. But yeah, women and minority-owned businesses are great certification data for that. That tree census is so much fun. At the New York City Google office, they have an art program or art installation that has the trees from the tree census represented as pieces of colored plexiglass with the height and count and things like that. It's really fun. I don't think we have the squirrel census there, but that's another really fun data set. I think we are about out of time, but we're also pretty close to the end of the slides, it looks like. So yeah, important. Next slide's important. New York City. Oh, there's a lot of links, it sounds like. Data open, or just search for New York City Open Data Portal, hearing information, open data reports, open data mailing list, requests for data sets. That's a good one. Contact. Yeah, that's actually also a lot of the agency websites have forms for submitting freedom of information law requests. If there's something like you read about in the news and want to get more information about, that's heavyweight, but it's your right. You should do that. You should ask for information from your government. And if it's something they can provide systematically, that's a great thing to request for open data. Yeah, thanks everyone. I had so much fun. And I learned a lot too. Martha was super helpful. And any questions or comments or things? Oh yes, always the blurb for the Open Data Ambassadors Program. It's great. It's you go through these topics, learn these tools, and share with your community. So
thank you all so much. This was really great. Natarajan, you were a lovely voice of guidance through this maze of data. We know we've held you over and people are beginning to leave, but we're happy to stick around. Would anyone have any questions that they'd like to still ask?
Hi, this is Christopher Worth. I'm a journalist with WNYC. And I just had a question. I wonder if you could recommend a data set for determining where DOT has conducted street improvement work. We're working on a project where we're trying to find out where that work has happened. Any recommendations there?
So in my experience...
I don't know if... Go ahead. You can search by agency after all. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So when we're asked these questions at these trainings, like, it's always amazing how 95% of the time, like, we can find something on the platform. Mm-hmm. So I've never looked at this particular. So there we go. Liam from Moda. And
see, I knew you guys would come up with it. Sorry, go ahead. Continue.
No, I love this. I love how that this just happened because it's just a case in point of, like, I've never thought about that data set per se. I thought there was a good chance that we would find it, and then the minute Liam finds it. So that's the amazingness of this whole system that we have.
And if you're not as familiar with it, I think the council member said it can be a little overwhelming when you open up that data and start poking around. If you're okay to stick around for a second, can I just explain very quickly what we're trying to do? And maybe there'll be some other really great ideas from people who work with data all day.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. And Liam, can you tell us how you actually, what keyword did you put in, or just so that Chris knows how he might do that in the future and not be intimidated by it? How did you find that?
Yeah, so I think just like in any search engine, keywords in the search bar usually works pretty well to find what you're looking for. You can also sort of make inquiries by agency to see, okay, what data sets does the Department of Transportation have up on Open Data right now? But yeah, and just
plug the BetaNYC Slack also. It's a great place to ask for help with New York City Open Data.
Oh, great. And you can just sign up for that Slack channel and get admitted to it? Okay. So it's BetaNYC Slack channel, yeah?
Slack instance. But yeah, I think there's a link on BetaNYC's website. Is that right?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. One good way to do that. So on these slides, let me pull this up. Not Rajan, if there's like a slide at the very end, it says end or something, and it has, thanks, Gabby. And it has the Slack handle or whatever you call those things. But the slide, also a quick plug for this slide deck. On slide like 60 or something like that, there's a whole list of resources that could be useful for you, including how to join BetaNYC's Slack.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
I'll let you.
Do you have that link?
I can see links in the chat, which is
just one final link I dropped in there is the link to the New York City Open Data Help Desk. And so if you have questions about a particular data set or want to learn more from an open data coordinator that works at that specific agency about how a data set was collected, or if you need clarification on anything that's in a data dictionary. So drop us a line.
Okay, great.
Yeah, especially for journalism, definitely start with the data dictionary too. That's crucial.
Okay, that's a good tip. What we're trying to do is correlate street improvement work with crash data over the past few, maybe 5 to 8 years of crash. Because one of the things that New York City is trying to do is improve streets where there are either lots of pedestrian injuries or pedestrian deaths, or in cyclists as well, and seeing if we can find out how those two things are working hand in hand. And so if anyone has ideas, if you're familiar with certain data sets and you think these two things would go very well together to arrive at an answer to that question, I'd be more than welcome to hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah, I've got nothing. The other thing, just if Chris, we've worked with journalists before at BetaNYC who need some help with this kind of correlating, data crunching, stuff like that. And we've developed a system around that. So if you want to submit what we call a radar research and data assistance request, we can have our whole team kind of dive into stuff like that for you. And we've even worked with the New York Times, to be honest. You can check out this radar. I think it's beta.nyc, I should know this, /radar. And you can submit an actual request that people can then work on in due time. Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. Fantastic. Yeah. All right. Thank you for all the helpful advice. I appreciate it.
I've got to run too. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Anyway.
Okay. Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.